So you may be wondering what a WellStar person is doing with all of these academic folks, the CDC, industry. So let me tell you a little bit about WellStar. WellStar is a health system. Some of you may be familiar. We have 5 hospitals, approximately 750 physicians and advanced practitioners. And we deliver care to the northwest part of Atlanta. We know as a health system that we have to change. We have to change the way we do business. We have to change the way we approach not only day-to-day patient care, but long-term care. So we have to look for new models and new innovation. A couple of years ago, we acquired the Center for Health Transformation, and that is now our collaborative arm to work with industry and academic institutions in order to look at innovative ways to care for our patients. We are partnering with academic centers, Georgia Tech, KSU, Georgia State, Emory. We are reaching out to other like-minded health systems, trying to look at new ways of delivering these services that are critical to our success long-term. So I want to thank everybody for allowing me to be here, and I'd like for our panel to come out. Thank you. Now, what we have is a very, very diverse group of individuals. And so we're going to start by allowing each one to take a couple of minutes to talk about what their organizations are doing and their roles in them. So first is Dr. Frank Richards from the Carter Center. And I have to admit, when I was looking through things, the director of river blindness, lymphatic filariasis, and schistosomiasis, these are things that I remember vaguely from medical school, so welcome.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the invitation to Health Connect South, this great inaugural meeting. A bit about myself. You mentioned schistosomiasis, lymphatic filariasis, onchocerciasis. These are parasitic diseases that I fell in love studying as a medical student. And I've been lucky enough to actually be able to make a career doing something that most medical students hear about in maybe 45 minutes of lectures. My personal professional mission statement is to use available tools to fight tropical infectious diseases and wherever possible to eradicate. And I've had a career, I'm trained in pediatrics and pediatric infectious disease and public health, and had a career at the Centers for Disease Control before coming to the Carter Center. And in both of those institutions, I've had a chance to explore really what I consider to be public health program. I'm interested in, I consider myself a public health practitioner, not a researcher, not an investigator. And essentially, our work at the Carter Center is involved in public health outreach, programs which are essentially delivering the available tools, such as we heard from Mark Rosenberg earlier, the Mectizan donation for river blindness, the GSK donation for lymphatic filariasis or elephantiasis, and bednet donations for malaria, and really have been involved with working with some really spectacular and very, very brave people at all different levels of the health system to be able to provide, to get some impact now from the available tools.
Thank you. Next we have Dr. Ami Klin. And Dr. Klin is the director of the Marcus Autism Center. And I read a little bit as well, and PhD from University in London, and then was at Yale for a number of years.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here. So I'm Ami Klin. I'm a clinician and I am a scientist. The Marcus Autism Center at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and at the Emory University School of Medicine is the largest center of clinical care for children with autism and their families in the country by a factor of several. We are also a hub of science. We have a research portfolio going from molecular genetics all the way through brain and innovative tools for community empowerment. Autism is more common than almost any other childhood condition, with potentially devastating consequences for child, for family, for the healthcare system, for the educational system, and for the community in general. 1 in every 68 children have autism, 1 in every 48 boys. This is more common than childhood cancers, juvenile diabetes, and HIV altogether. The societal cost of autism is in excess of $130 billion a year in the US alone. But most importantly, the lifetime cost of care for a person with autism ranges between $1.4 and $2.4 million. This is a tremendous burden for families. Both the economics and the clinical reality of autism is upside down. It's a neurodevelopmental condition. We should identify this condition early in order to help our children to fulfill their promise, in order for them to have better outcomes. And yet, the median age of diagnosis of autism in this country is still about 5 years, which basically means that were we able to do, and that's the mission of our center, to bring science to the community, to identify the condition early and to improve access to care, we would assure a much better future for our families and for the children impacted by this condition.
Thank you, Dr. Klin. Next, we have Todd Shearer, who is the Associate VP for Research, Executive Director of Technology Transfer at Emory University, and a toxicologist by training, that's all.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Originally, I thought I didn't fit on the panel, but maybe none of us fit, in which case that means we all fit. I head the Technology Transfer Office, and a lot of times people think that means we fix their computers, but we don't. That's the IT office. The Tech Transfer Office is really there and responsible for helping our basic researchers and our clinicians do something with an invention when they make it. So if they've discovered a potential new medical device or a new therapeutic or a diagnostic, or more and more these days, healthcare IT, my office is there to help make sure that we get intellectual property protection, that we triage that invention disclosure and take a look at its commercial potential, where it might fit in the marketplace, and then that we begin marketing it, and then negotiate a license, and eventually, hopefully, see product hit the market, which sometimes will generate additional revenue for the university and sometimes not. A lot of the technology that we transfer is really just for the benefit of society and doesn't generate revenue for the institution. I often say I've got the best job on campus, which I think is saying a lot because we've got 27,000 people that work at Emory, but it's a wonderful place to be and a wonderful position to be within the institution because we get to be exposed to cutting-edge science and research every day of the week and every week of the year. And it's a high-risk, high-reward business. It's not well understood by most people. We're at the very beginning of the innovation pathway where risk is highest and funding is hardest to find. And so we spend a lot of time turning over rocks and a lot of time helping establish collisions. We run a dating service out of the Tech Transfer Office where we introduce promising new entrepreneurs to our startup companies. And that's what we spend our time doing. The greatest challenge that I have is managing expectations. Again, at the front end of the innovation pathway is where expectations are most often not met because we know so little, because there's so much risk that lays in front of us. And it's not a well understood part of the process.
Okay, thank you. And next is John Minna, and John is the Vice President of Global Strategy for Healthcare Logistics at UPS. John, I have to say on the website, they didn't have a lot about you, but I saw a beautiful video that you did about what this topic is. So I was wondering how this all fit together, but I see it now.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, some of you or many of you are probably thinking, what is the company that has brown vehicles delivering the products that I order online to my house doing here? Well, yes, we do that. We deliver the things you order online, but we also deliver medications to people in homes, devices to patients in their homes, and those same medicines and devices, we deliver them to hospitals, to physician offices, to wholesalers, to distributors, and up and down the supply chain. In fact, one of the other things that UPS does is we have nearly 50 warehouses around the world that are healthcare dedicated, compliant warehouses that hold nothing but healthcare products for manufacturers. And it's about almost 7 million square feet of space that houses these products. And again, these are all very compliant facilities, and the purpose of these facilities is to help us expedite the movement of these life-saving products and medicines to patients and through the supply chain as quickly and as efficiently as possible. You know, many of you know and are familiar with the Affordable Care Act and the impact we've heard all today about how that's forcing many healthcare companies to really think about how do they drive down cost? How do they continue to meet all the extreme regulatory environments and requirements and at the same time provide better care at a lower cost? Well, every product has to move through the supply chain, and we work with healthcare companies up and down the supply chain to try to make that supply chain much more efficient and drive down the ultimate cost of care, while at the same time moving biologics in a temperature-sensitive and temperature-controlled environment and doing that very efficiently. So that's our mission. That's the mission of the group that I work with at UPS.
Great. So as you can tell, quite a diverse group, a lot of different interests, and a lot of different roles. So we're going to start with some questions, and we'll start with Ami, we'll not go in order. So from your viewpoint, and we'll let you answer, and then each one can chime in, but from your viewpoint, what is the single biggest leap that we can make to transform healthcare? What can we do as individuals and as organizations to transform healthcare the way we deliver it now?
Well, I'm a believer that bringing the science to the community is the way to go, because there are the cost of the present, I think, is not sustainable. But in order for us to do that, we need to make sure that we focus on some areas of activity. I'm particularly sort of invested in implementation science, on how to develop solutions that are community viable, that emerge out of the lab, but achieve tangible benefits for children and families in the community. And this is possible. Together with that, we need to monetize this equation. We need to make sure that we understand what is the cost benefit, the cost effectiveness. In sum, we need a much greater investment in health economics so that we can show to those who are decision makers that this is an investment that makes sense. We're all in the business of reducing the cost of care and improving outcomes for our children and families.
Great, thank you. Frank?
Well, I like what you said. I mean, I want to pick up on, I think, a very important element that I thought about when I was asked to join this panel on health care delivery. And I would really like to expand our notion of what we mean by health care. Because so many people are sort of facility fixed when they think of health care delivery. And my point when this first came up was, well, I'm not really facility fixed. As a matter of fact, my job is to get beyond the facility, to get to the end of the road for outreach. And it's maybe if we come out of this with people thinking of health care delivery as not just being fixed facilities and the clinics and the people in the white coats, but something that has an outreach mechanism that involves communities, neighbors, friends, sort of more of a community activist spirit. How do we find that? And I think it's really interesting. The Institute of Medicine just came out with a recent study just in the last few months, looking at the idea of community involvement in medicine, and it really comes to implementation research. And at the end of the day, what is the capacity out there to do that? How do you explore it? How do you find ways to make it work? And how do you reject ways that don't work? And it's not easy.
Todd?
So, yeah, I totally agree with what Ami said. From my perspective, my job would be a lot easier if we did a better job of holding everyone involved in healthcare delivery and elsewhere across the institution accountable for being better innovators. Clinicians shouldn't just understand how to see patients and how to treat a patient. They should also understand that part of their job in treating patients every day is to be aware of advances in innovation that might make that treatment work better. And if people were aware of it at the grassroots level, and aware of the fact that things like intellectual property protection matter if you want to see some things get to the market, not everything, that market size matters, that knowing what already is being done elsewhere in the world, those are all things that matter if we're going to help push new innovation to the marketplace. And I think it's unfortunate. I think it's high time that we started really holding those people accountable for understanding how those things work, and not just them, but their managers or department chairs all the way up the food chain, so that we don't squander potentially valuable innovation by not taking the right steps.
Thank you. John?
So, one of the things that many care organizations are working on right now is how to make the dollars go further, right? And they're responding to big government initiatives, not just here in the US with the Affordable Care Act, but also Mexico has a Universal Coverage Act, and China and many other countries as well. And obviously we have an aging population. But how do we make those dollars go forward? Because we have to provide access to more patients all over the world, more people in needy countries who don't necessarily have access to medicine. How do we get those humanitarian care relief packages and medicines to those parts of the world? Aging populations throughout the world, and everybody knows about aging China, aging Europe. How do we get more medicine and more products to those places around the world, and how do we build it and do it efficiently? And again, it's responding to more access and driving down the cost. And again, that's really something that I think is going to eventually provide more access to everybody.
Great. So, Wellstar has started focusing less on the vertical integration model and now reaching out to sort of a horizontal integration. And by that I mean that we're looking across different industries and different platforms for partners. And as you hear from up here, we have a variety of different people with different strategies. But I would ask each of you, is there an example that you can give about a sort of program that is not along those traditional collaborative programs, but more of an unlikely collaboration that's been beneficial to the delivery of health care? And let's see, who shall I start with? Frank?
Well, I had the perfect example, having seen some of these questions before we started, and then Mark Rosenberg took it, because it was the discussion about the linkage of public-private partnership between Big Pharma, a beautiful description, Mark, of the evil Big Pharma and the we do good sort of pinko side of public health. So I don't want to repeat that one. But I do just want to take a chance, because the clock is ticking down, to say what's interesting to me in the discussion, where I would simplify things by looking at the 3 Ds: discover, develop, and deploy. As I mentioned, I'm a deployer. We have a discoverer, we have a developer, and everyone has their own valley of death. Everybody always says, oh, well, we're discoverers, and that's the high-risk area. And then the developers say, no, the valley of death is really when you get to the larger trials and a molecule that we thought would work fails. And as a deployer interested in eradication and elimination, when you get down to the very last cases, those cases become extremely expensive if you really want to get to zero. And then the health economists are always telling you there's a better buy for your public health dollar, as they always think of the now rather than in the future. So I just wanted to chip in on the valley of death issue.
Thank you. Ami?
We want to prevent things from becoming costly, both in clinical and in monetary terms, and we want to serve individuals where they are. For that, you need partnerships. Partnerships are truly opportunities. So from our science, we now know that the platform for brain development is reciprocal social interaction, is what happens between a baby and the baby's caregiver. That emerged out of the field of social brain and autism. But the commissioner for the Department of Public Health here in Georgia, Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, really was taken with this idea. And together with many, many agencies, organizations here in Atlanta, there was the suggestion that that idea and the modalities of treatment that we have in order to train parents about the importance of speaking to their babies, this was something that was applicable much beyond the autism community and impacts children who grow up in underprivileged situations and children with hearing impairment and so forth. So as part of a coalition, we submitted a grant together to United Way in which we work with mothers in WIC clinics or in whatever they are in order to make an intervention that is going to change the reality of the home where those babies are going to be born in.
Great. John? I'll go out of order.
Okay, yeah, so one interesting collaboration, and it happened, just by happenstance at UPS. We had an engineer in Kentucky who happened to have a friend who made refrigeration devices that are used for many pharma companies to store biologics in a very temperature-controlled environment. And with more and more medicines being biologics-based, as you transport these medicines across the world, if they get exposed to extreme heat or to other, or even extreme cold, it renders the biologic useless and in some cases even fatal. So we worked with this professor who made these devices, made these refrigerators, and we said, well, what if we could figure out a way to take these things and put them on airplanes and fly them around the world? And working through a detailed collaboration, we don't know a lot about refrigeration, but we do know a lot about what's needed to transport something and the different environments that those things get exposed to. We also have relationships with the FAA, the FDA, the DEA, and we worked with them to re-engineer this refrigerator so that it could fit into airplanes, that it could be locked into place, that it could be charged while it's on the ground. And as a result, we're able to transport these medicines now in a 2 to 8 degree Celsius environment very efficiently around the world without exposure to extreme temperatures.
That's great. Todd?
Yeah, so a few months ago, some of you may have heard about an acquisition that a publicly traded company called ThorTech made. And they bought a young startup company for $75 million. But what most people probably don't know is that the company they bought is actually a company that was spun out around technology that was jointly developed at Emory and Georgia Tech. And just to give you an example of how creative these partnerships can be sometimes, we have a joint biomedical engineering program between Emory and Georgia Tech. It's a highly ranked program. It works really well because you've got a medical school and an engineering school, and where we overlap in the biomedical engineering space is where we created this novel partnership around a new department. That department was actually got its initial funding from the Coulter Foundation, Wallace Coulter, from the old Beckman Coulter days. And that program has a translational fund, and that translational fund, in order to get the money, it requires that you bring one of our clinical faculty from Emory out of the School of Medicine together with an engineer at Georgia Tech. Those are partnerships that don't happen unless you require them, unless you have a really good reward at the end of the day. In this case, it happens to be money. And so money was rewarded to a clinical faculty member at Emory and at Georgia Tech to work together on this new technology that would have never happened if you weren't able to pair an engineer with a clinical faculty member who understood where the needs were in the clinic. And that's the technology that we eventually filed for patents on and started this company up. So kind of a great example of where horizontal collaborations, even across institutions, can really pay off.
Great. So a lot of innovation. We're about out of time, so I'm going to float this idea, and if anybody just wants to quickly shout something out. Where do you see new collaborative efforts occurring? What avenues have we not yet explored to improve healthcare?
So go ahead.
Please, go.
I was going to say one of the things I would mention, sitting next to UPS, which is right next to me, we've always talked about cross-industry collaborations, but we need way cross-industry collaborations. And folks like UPS that are masters in logistics, and those of us in healthcare that need better logistics if we're going to move patients around and decrease costs. I think there's an opportunity, a lot more opportunity for collaboration in that space. But we don't talk together every day and walk the same circles.
Right.
I'll have a sentence. As part of our science, we developed a diagnostic device that was developed as a lab-based and now We are going to go through an FDA-registered clinical trial with the goal of deploying in primary care physicians' offices as well baby clinics. That involves the collaboration of primary care providers and those who are mandated to provide access to care to children and families. So those are the kinds of things that give us hope that we can all work together, because without that collective ownership, we cannot address those kinds of thorny issues.
Well, I want to thank everybody in the interest of trying to finish on time and keep us on schedule. We'll go ahead and end. I want to remind them that we will be in session B of the sessions later this afternoon. So if you have further questions, I want to thank every one of you for a great job. I really appreciate it. And let's let the next group come out.
Thank you.